change in the stance that Russia has taken over the crisis in the Ukraine. We need no more weapons crossing the border, no more troops crossing the border, no more support for the separatists, respect for the Ukrainian territorial integrity. That is what is required, and that is what must be pushed for.
Americans have spoken in several polls. They want nothing to do with what is currently boiling over in the Middle East, and they certainly don't want to get involved in the mess that is Ukraine. However, with both regions spinning dangerously out of control and America involved no matter how we try to stay away, how long can the Obama administration stay restrained? And what will our decision mean to what can only be described as weak international standing? So welcome back to MidPoint. President of the London Center for Policy Research and co-author of the book, The Sunni Vanguard. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Herb London back into MidPoint once again. Dr. London, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
The president made his statement today basically aimed right at Vladimir Putin. Of course, it was more harsh language. In actuality, though, there were those who were going to say he really could do nothing more than that at the present time. Is that the case, or should he have taken a greater step forward and been more pointed to the Russian president?
I think he could be more pointed, and I think America does have some leverage. One, we can freeze all Russian assets across the globe. Clearly, that's one thing that could be done. And certainly our allies might be inclined to join us in that activity. Second, there's no reason why the president can't deploy a squadron of F-16s that are placed in Ukraine with the acceptance of the Ukrainian government. And three, there's no reason why we can't arm the Ukrainians with fairly sophisticated weapons, a request that was made earlier to the White House and denied. So there is leverage that we have, but the president has chosen not to act. The very fact that he appears equivocal is in the mind of Putin a sign of weakness. One of the reasons why Putin feels as though he can engage in the kind of activity he has in supporting the rebels, the Russian supported rebels, is because he realizes that this White House is unlikely to do anything in return.
Let's look at what might be the easiest to do here. The F-16s, the arming, the insurgents, let's put that aside for the moment. Let's look at the economic sanctions and the leverage that is there right now. If the president has this at his disposal at this moment, there are those who would ask, why does he dither and allow this man to continue to think he can get away with it? Is it simply because he doesn't feel he has the authority to do it? Is he afraid? Is he what? There has to be a reason here, and the American people are dying to know.
Well, I think the reason has become very obvious. You may recall that when the mic was off, the president indicated in approximately a year and a half ago that we would engage in further flexibility. He has also made it clear that the United States is not willing to engage in kind of global activities. By and large, there have been one opportunity after another where the president has withdrawn, has suggested that the United States has no role to play. This is true with the standing forces in Iraq. It's true with the statement that was made about Syria. So that the United States is engaged in withdrawal from international affairs based on the assumption that Mr. Obama has that the United States' involvement has no positive effect on the way in which global affairs act. And that, by and large, has been the sentiment on the part of this administration. It's one of the reasons why people around the globe are asking the obvious question: where is the United States? What role can we play? Is the United States the balance wheel in creating international equilibrium, or is it not? And the answer is it's not at the moment.
Is it simply a matter that we are too stretched at this point? We are too thin. We are still trying to get out of a theater of war in the Middle East right now. You have public sentiment that says we don't want to be there. We don't want to be in the Middle East. We don't want to be in the Ukraine. So is this seriously a president who's going, we don't have the ability to go in and be effective?
Well, keep in mind that the United States is suffering from a kind of war fatigue. Well, war fatigue is very much related to leadership. If the president were to mount a real campaign and talk about the need for the United States to involve itself in various areas of the world where we have national interest, I think the public would go along with him. But if the president doesn't make that argument, obviously the public is not going to respond appropriately. Now, my feeling about this matter is that the president of the United States has the ability to use American forces around the world without necessarily being the policeman of the world. We can no longer play that role. But there are interests that we have. We certainly have the opportunity to deploy forces when necessary. So the United States should actively involve itself in areas where our interests are at stake. And one could make the case that our interests are clearly at stake in Israel, because what happens in Israel happens to the Middle East. If you allow terrorism to take its role in Israel, there is no doubt in my mind that it will have a profound effect on world affairs.
Is this as simple as saying, as some people would, and again, these are critics of the president who would say that he simply lacks the political guts to get something done?
I think that it's not a question of political guts. It's a question of a philosophical standard that the president has about not involving the United States in international affairs. The withdrawal from international affairs has been based in part on the apologies that have been made around the globe about previous efforts on the part of the United States. It's been based on the sentiments that were expressed at Cairo. It is based on resetting, not simply the role with Russia, but resetting the role of the United States in the whole matter of global affairs.
Let me get down to a couple of statements here. First of all, I want to show you, and I want to read a statement. And this is from Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, and I think this pretty much sets everything up. 3 notorious crimes were committed. The first crime is a terrorist attack committed from Russian weapons by Russian terrorists and Russian mercenaries. The second crime, I can't look calmly at how the terrorists treated the bodies of those who died. Thirdly, destroying the evidence is absolutely unacceptable. If we are going to take all this and we are going to ask Putin to do something, to do anything, don't we still need to have the EU behind us? Because Germany is right now trying to get cozy with Russia in a number of deals. You have the rest of the EU, which doesn't seem, and I'm going to go back to that phraseology again, political guts or political fortitude, whatever you call it, they don't seem to have the wherewithal to do it. And the third part of that is going to be the energy tap that the Russians control right now. It would seem as if the Europeans are trapped, but could they just say, that's it, we have to do something regardless of how it hurts us?
Well, I think that there is no question in my mind that the Europeans have understood how to love freedom but not how to defend it. And this is certainly true in the German case. They are going to come to the realization that the Russian natural gas that they depend on is obviously an extortion mechanism that is employed by the Russians whenever they run into a situation where there's a moral dilemma. The Russians can always say, fine, you're not happy about the stance we've taken? We can shut the tap, we can turn off the faucet. No longer electricity for your part of the world. The response on the part of the United States should be, we will do everything in our power to make sure you get your natural gas. We can now export natural gas. We can do something even more significant. We can exploit the Leviathan in the Mediterranean, controlled by the Israelis. There is a method that can be used by the Australians, they've used it very effectively, of converting natural gas into liquid gas and have it transported across the seas and provide whatever the Ukraine needs and whatever Europe needs, probably at a discounted price. So there is no doubt that we can do an awful lot on this score to make sure that the Russians do not use natural gas as a weapon. And it is a weapon. Moreover, it's the only hard currency that the Russians possess. They need oil and natural gas prices to be high in order to sustain their economy, which is failing in every other respect.
Let me get back to weapons. You mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, you talked about 3 things that the president could do. You mentioned leverage. The second one was F-16s. The third one was arm the Ukrainians. Isn't that really, though, what the United States does not want to do? Again, you have a population that you said is war-weary right here, and if we are lending F-16s and then arming the Ukrainians, is that not just part of that slippery slope and puts America into another theater of operation?
Well, I don't think that that's true. I think that you can deploy F-16s, do so at the behest of the Ukrainian government, but not necessarily sending forces. These are airplanes that you're sending. They know how to fly those airplanes, and we can provide the instructions, just as the Russians probably provided instructions for the SA-11. This is a fairly sophisticated weapon. It's not as if these farmers, who are supposedly rebels fighting in behalf of the Russian government, know anything at all about the sophisticated technology. So we can certainly provide that kind of weapons for the Ukrainian government. They did request it. They didn't say send American troops. They didn't say send American forces. There's a lot you can do in the diplomatic front, on the economic front, and on this armament front, without necessarily talking about the deployment of forces.
Is what we have seen in the Ukraine evidence beyond a shadow of a doubt that Putin has lost control over the individuals who are there, whether it be military or separatists, whatever it is? Because it would seem as if they are acting on their own. They may be getting some orders from Moscow, but it still seems to be as if they are acting as part of a rogue military.
I don't think this is rogue at all. I think the Russians have been dictating the terms of that warfare. I think they put this force together. I think these mercenaries are paid by the Russian government. I think the SA-11 could not have been fired unless there was some active involvement, some participation by a fairly sophisticated, knowledgeable Russian source who could show them how to use it, or use it himself. I do not believe that this is a rogue group. I think by and large the Russians have been very much dictating to them the terms of their engagement, and the fact that they are involved at all is directly related to Putin's attitude.
30 seconds. Does this just tell us that Putin's attitude is, I'm going to get this country back, I'm going to do what I want to do, I am going to create a new Cold War, you can't stop me, try it?
I think he's trying to create the greater Russia. It's an attempt to recreate the Soviet Union. The near abroad is going to be incorporated into the new Russia as he sees it, a great power in the Eurasian continent.
It is frightening to think about that we once went through a Cold War, but we may be sitting right on top of one all over again. Herb, it is a pleasure to have you on the show once again. We'll absolutely do it again. And again, the book for Dr. Herb London is Sunni Vanguard. We make note that you should look it up on Amazon because it is a fascinating read. Dr. London, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, coming up next, the Obama administration continues to avoid the reality of illegal immigration, paying more attention to a certain segment of the American population first and foremost. That is the opinion of our next guest. We'll dig into that a whole lot more when MidPoint continues right here on the Newsmax TV network.